We're so excited to have you. I am using cards because my team knows that I will go off on a tangent if I don't follow what's written down in front of me. So we're here to talk about essentially sustainability, responsible design for a sustainable future. I'll introduce the people sitting next to me in a second. So Earth Day was this past weekend, which is what prompted our team to put together this event. And the main focus is sustainability across sort of three professional opinions and different thoughts and thinking and approach how we can change the world. Hopefully change the world. Interior design is responsible for about 10% of CO2 emissions in the world, which when you put it in the context of things like cars and other buildings, it's a huge amount. And construction is 40% of CO2 emissions. So the industry in general creates a huge issue from a sustainability perspective. So I'll introduce beside me, I have Sarah, and Sarah is, how would you describe yourself, Sarah?
I run a company called Goldfinch Energy, which I started 3 years ago to help people not get talked into staying stuck with fossil fuels as their primary heating source in their home. I have degrees in engineering and computer science, and I'm a registered energy advisor. So a bit of a technical person, but just also love helping people solve problems with their home and how to make it better for the planet.
Perfect. And we'll hear more from Sarah in a second. This is Trevor Wallace from Reflect Architecture. Trevor, do you want to say a few words about yourself? Or?
Sure. I'm the founding partner and owner of Reflect Architecture, and we do everything from commercial retail to commercial buildings, multi-res, and single family. So we cover a broad spectrum, which is great because we get to meet with folks like on both sides of me and kind of synthesize as much information as we can across different disciplines, which makes tonight's conversation super interesting because we can take technology that we mess around with in commercial and we can apply it to residential, and it's kind of a very exciting space to be in. But all in all, I'm an architect.
Yeah, and a good one, I'll say. And then besides Trevor is Gillian Gillies, who works as an interior designer. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Gillian Gillies, founder and principal designer at Gillian Gillies Interiors. We're based in Leaside. Our projects are primarily residential. However, we're always on the hunt for a beautiful little restaurant or hotel. I'm originally from Edinburgh. I've lived in Toronto for 20 years. And I would say when I moved here, for the love of a good Canadian on a very cold seriously, I'd never visited Canada in the winter. And I moved here on December the 8th or something, 2002, to be met at the airport with a woolly hat and a coat. And I call that my sort of winter of discontent, when I really realized how much time we spend indoors here. I think on average it's 87% of we spend our lives indoors. And moving here really changed the way that I work and how I think about the quality of life that we need to sort of give ourselves when we're indoors all the time. So
Trapped.
When we're trapped, yes.
At least that's how I feel.
I'm trying not to be so negative on the Canadian weather, but yes, trapped, yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to start with Sarah. So I have a few questions on here. We will open it up to a Q&A at the end. So try and save your questions until the end if you can. So Sarah, the first question, what are some of the options for people looking to reduce their carbon footprint? What are your top go-tos?
Yeah, top go-tos, great. So as far as carbon footprint in our homes, the biggest source of emissions is heating. I guess I sort of said that in my introduction. But heating with whether it's a gas furnace or a gas boiler, propane is even worse, but if we're all in Toronto, it's primarily going to be a natural gas, natural in quotes, which is a fossil fuel. So the good thing in Ontario is our electricity grid is fairly emissions-free. So, we create power with nuclear and water, and I'm not going to get into the debate around nuclear, but, as far as emissions goes, our grid is like 95% emissions-free. So switching from a gas furnace to, say, a electrically powered heat pump is environmentally the equivalent of getting a car off the road. It's the same emissions. So that one is sort of the biggest. Second largest source of emissions is your hot water. So I don't need, do you want me to get into
do,
details?
I do, yeah.
Okay. And maybe I should just do a little bit of like, here's what a heat pump is as well.
Sure.
Not everyone's heard of it. It's not the most attractively named appliance, but a heat pump, if you haven't heard of it, it's probably a technology that you've come across already, because if you've interacted with a fridge or an air conditioner, it's the same idea. So you've got refrigerant flowing and moving heat, not making it, so it's pumping the heat around. A heat pump works just like an air conditioner in the summer, so it's able to grab heat from inside and move it outdoors. In the winter, it's able to operate in reverse. They're amazing. Like, there have been improvements in technology in the last 10 years, so they can heat in Toronto. My home is heated entirely with a heat pump, and we had some really cold days this winter, like a minus 22, and it was fine. It kept the house pretty comfortable. The most important thing is just making sure you get a properly sized heat pump that's suitable for your home and your ductwork and
So can I ask a question?
Yes.
You can use your existing ductwork,
Yes.
but how much does it cost to change to a heat pump from a traditional gas burner or gas boiler?
Yeah, for as far as costs go, you're looking at like $15,000 to $20,000 to like all in installation and everything to switch from, say, a gas. It's going to replace your furnace and your air conditioner, which typically these days costs around $10,000, give or take. The great thing is there are a couple of rebates that most people can tap into that can get you up to $6,500 worth of rebates. So if you're buying a heat pump that's around $15,000 and you count for that $6,500 rebate, it's actually pretty similar to a new gas furnace and air conditioner.
And I assume your monthly costs go down?
They do, actually, yeah. Like 3 years ago when we started, people were spending a little bit more just because of the way that the cost of gas and electricity went. Heat pumps are way more efficient than gas appliances. Because they're not making heat, they're moving it. They're like 300% more efficient. But we've had, in the last year in particular, gas prices have gone up substantially. So yes, everyone that I know of that's been heating with a heat pump this year has said that they're saving more than what they normally, spending less on electricity for heating than what they normally would for gas, yeah, which is what we found the same in our house.
Yeah. And then hot water was your next comment?
Yeah, hot water. There are two good options as far as getting off of gas. And I know that a bunch in the audience are designers, and I'll just say, if you're planning a renovation, I think a lot of people look to the on-demand as an option just because it's small. There aren't amazing on-demand non-gas options out there. So if you're looking to get off of gas, it's going to be either an electric tank, which could be paired with an off-peak timer, so it only reheats overnight when electricity is cheap. We're getting we've got super low overnight rates of 2.4 cents per kilowatt hour, so super cheap. Or the heat pump technology also exists in hot water tanks as well, which is the most affordable way to heat your water across all the things.
I didn't know about any of this.
That's okay. That's why I'm here.
That was 10 years ago. I had
Things have changed, and they're still changing a lot. I sort of only really have talked about heat pumps that connect to ductwork, so it would replace your furnace, but there are also air-to-water heat pumps, and so if you like in-floor heating or you have radiators, that's the area where I think I'm seeing more and more technology come, and I think we're going to see a lot more changes there too.
Yeah. My house is radiant, so that is interesting to me. Yeah. So what types of design work well in terms of energy savings? Is there a style of home or a style of building that's more efficient than others?
We're talking about sort of a newer, a new
flat
home.
roof, peaked roof.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I mean,
steel construction, wood construction.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, this is a great question. I mean, the more simple you can go, avoiding things like dormers and crawl spaces, sort of keeping it to if you imagine basically an energy efficient home, a comfortable home, is going to be able to have a nice blanket, like a sweater wrapped around it. So the more sort of
the fewer
turns,
jobs.
yeah, exactly, the better. And other than that, there are a couple of as far as the embodied carbon, so the emissions associated with making products, the two, I would say, biggest decisions that can have the biggest impact are the insulation material that's used and the siding material that's used. So,
And are you an advocate for spray foam insulation, or is that horrendously bad for the environment?
oh my gosh, yeah. I do not advocate. I do not advocate for spray foam insulation, and I work with some green architects who like run away from it, screaming. I'm a bit more of a pragmatist, so being an engineer, I think that kind of comes in my DNA. I mean, I see that it's very high performing as far as an insulation material, but I personally have seen it does not hold up when you're using it as an air barrier. So, and
Can you I know what that
yes,
means, but can you
okay, no,
explain it?
fair. So, with a house to be energy efficient, you need, and in the building code for a new home anyway, you're gonna have to insulate it and add an air barrier. The insulation is like the sweater for your home, and the air barrier is like the windbreaker for your home. So there are lots of ways you can add an air barrier. From the outside, you might see like something called blue skin. You might see that on commercial buildings, or even house wrap, the Tyvek stuff, if used properly, can be an air barrier. From the inside, you could use spray foam. Some spray foam is rated to be an air barrier. But what I found, because part of my job involves testing the airtightness of a home using like a big fan, and I'll actually measure how much leakage there is and try and detect the spots. And I found for homes that have been renovated with spray foam, they're not as airtight as you would expect, given that there was an air barrier added. They're no different than a home. In my personal experience, I've done hundreds of homes. They're no more airtight than a home that was insulated with something that's better environmentally, such as rock wool.
Oh, interesting.
So that's my controversial opinion.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a very well-educated opinion to me. Okay, thank you. We're going to come back to you with questions at the end. So, Trevor, over to you. I have a question. How would you define responsible architecture?
Ooh. That's really tough. I think you need to first understand, what you're trying to get out of the architecture you're designing and building. And I think what's most important, and this is going to be like probably the biggest takeaway that we'll all get to eventually, is just less is better. Like everything that we have around us, this chair and my pants, it all has embodied carbon. So the more objects and things you need, the more light fixtures you need, the more cladding you need, the more flooring you need, everything has embodied carbon. So basically less is much better. And so when we look at responsible architecture, I think the first thing we do is just try not to build as much of it. And then when we do that, we want to be very thoughtful about how we program the spaces so that everything goes in the right spot. If you have the fortune of building a house from scratch or doing a major renovation, there's a real opportunity to sort of unpack what you and your family and the people that you're going to have in your home need, and make sure that there's a spot for everything, but then you're also not doubling down on spots. Like you don't need a spot to do this and this if they can do it in the same place. And then that gets back to quantity. That's kind of like the biggest thing. And then from that, a lot of what Sarah was talking about, like air barriers and things like that, is just spray foam is horrible. Like I'll come out and say it. It's like there's like 1,000 reasons. Health is a huge one. Anyone installing anything with a mask on telling you not to be there for the next 48 hours is like a bad starting point. Second is it basically is unassembled, like it's permanent. You can't unassemble it. So you'd put your stud wall up, you'd put all your electrical in, your plumbing in, and then you'd spray foam, which basically puts it all in concrete. Like it makes the whole building like a rock. So you want to like move that TV when your like kid wants the thing from here to there. It's like, no, you literally need to demo your house. Like it's like, you literally, because you can't cut it, because then it's toxic. So then it's like, you can't unpack it because it's now glued to everything. So like, there's really easy ways to put together a house now, particularly in new construction, that are really responsible in terms of disassembly. So you want to make an addition, no problem. You take this off, you take that off, you open this up, and you move it out. That's great, because it means you're not throwing stuff in landfill or having to deal with this stuff. And then a lot of what Gillian will talk about is like just what you put on the inside. It's like, I'll save that for her, but I think responsible design is understanding the quantity of what you're building and creating a lot of purpose behind what you build and making sure that it's really thoughtful.
And sounds like almost the simplicity in building, like going back to how we built historically, is almost better for our homes.
The amount of times as I learn about technologies and I'm like, oh my God, shutters, like that's 5 times better than any technology I've seen in the past 50 years. Like it keeps all the heat on the outside of the envelope. You can open and close them. The air still moves through them. Like they're literally genius. Yeah. So the amount of times that we go backwards and just think like, oh my gosh, like this was figured out a long time ago, and we've just like layered.
Why don't we see more of it then? Like, why don't we see more houses with shutters? Are people just not thinking about it in that context?
Literally, yeah. Yeah, it's like, oh, shutters are cute. They're on the side. They don't actually close in front of the windows. It's like, well, you go to somewhere in the world where they use them all the time, and it makes a ton of sense. Yeah.
Trevor
Yeah.
has just finished a project in Newfoundland, so I'm teasing him a little bit.
Yeah.
And do you feel it's easy to assemble your home in a way that allows you to evolve in the space? Like you were talking about moving TVs and whatnot. So when you design a home, are you thinking about how do I make it last for this family so there's not a further environmental impact in 10 years or 15 years?
For sure. And that's one of the biggest questions. I mean, it's invariable that when we design a home from scratch or a major renovation for any individual, I mean, everybody's different. Some people love to cook, some people love to have a bath, some people love to entertain, some people hate to entertain, some people love to watch TV in the daytime, some people hate to watch TV. Like, there's all these different things. And when you start to like unpack that and you start to design something unique for somebody, you're gonna want to address all that. So invariably, as life changes, those circumstances change. And one of the things that we're always gonna want to ask, and all of us, is, what's next? Like, okay, we're talking about the design now. We've got like a year in planning, then we've got a year in change of construction, and then those kids that are like this old are now this old, and what does that look like? And then how do we make sure the next, like, when you're an empty nester or on your way to being an empty nester, how do we make sure that those things are accommodated? It's like, do we need the side door? Where does this person move in 10 or 15 years? So at least if it's not literally in the design at that moment, it can be easily accommodated with a view on that in the future.
In the future. And that's just through an interview process with your clients?
Totally. It's, any good project that you endeavor, particularly when it's custom, is going to start with a sense of discovery. And you, like, as I said, everyone's so different that if you're kind of just like baking a floor plan out and throwing it at someone for like a couple grand, it's not going to address those issues.
How many of your clients ask you about environmental architecture?
I hoped more. Yeah. I think a lot of people are interested, and this is like kind of, I guess, a real chat, but a lot of people are very interested in the idea of it, but the reality is it's expensive. The reality is it's not common practice in North America, so you have to be careful about contractors. Like everyone says, oh, you use spray foam. It's like, well, no, like that's not good. It's, stuff Sarah's talking about is like relatively like avant-garde in the North American context. In Europe, of course, particularly in northern countries, it's like dime a dozen. No one would touch gas there, And California and in BC right now, they charge you if you don't run an appropriate voltage electrical cord right next to your gas appliance, because they want to make sure that you're ready to make that switch. And if you're not doing it, they'll charge you for it. So there's movement. I think when push comes to shove, it takes someone who cares, and it takes a little bit of money. And that has to be a priority. And it comes in the form of your health and the long-term longevity of the planet, however much you balance those two out. But how many? Everyone cares about it. But when it comes down to like...
Who are willing to spend.
Yeah, and it's like the savings are there. But like, what does a flight actually cost environmentally? It's a lot more than it costs on the ticket price. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to like wrap your head around all that stuff, but we'll get there.
I'll ask, I know I'm going off, so my team's not allowed to get mad at me for this one. Do you feel that the government is doing enough to encourage people to be mindful of green design and green construction?
No. The rebates are there, and if you have someone like Sarah, or you put the time in, or your designer or architect is aware of this kind of stuff, they can find those rebates for you. Solar's like swung here. Some can, some can't. Solar's like come and gone. Like the prices are like really important on payback and stuff like that. I think we're all moving that direction, but I think people need to take it upon themselves to understand what they're trying to accomplish, and there are people around who understand this stuff and are getting better at understanding this stuff. It's a kind of a bit of a moving target, and but there are some very simple solves for sure.
Last question. What is your favorite, from a design perspective, your favorite element to incorporate into a new house that is environmentally, is it shutters? Just wondering.
Heat pumps. I'll leave the mechanical to you. I think for me, it's solar shading. It's just understanding that like the sun is really hot, and windows, triple pane, cool, but like that's not actually helping. The bottom line is in the wintertime and in the summertime, the sun comes in at a very known aspect. Like we all know what like angle, depending where you're on the planet, sun comes in at, and if we can stop sun from coming into the envelope, into your like through your windows, like curtains are nice, but like the sun comes in, it heats back the curtains, it convects upwards, and all the heat just goes right into your home, you know? So I've just, the kind of soup du jour for me right now is like trying to understand solar shading and like how to like meaningfully, and that can be easy as an overhang or shutters.
Does
like
it ever involve landscape design?
Sure, landscape, absolutely. I mean, trees are incredible. They pop up all their leaves and they create, you know, shadows right at the time of year that you want them, and they drop all their leaves, and all that heat comes in from the sun to warm your winter home. So, absolutely, great question. But that's kind of what I'm like trying to passive and active and all the different ways to like manage solar gain right now.
Feels like there's so much to learn. Thank you. Okay, Gillian, over to you. Do you feel that design is, when you're working with clients, is design more important, or is reflecting their personality in the home more important? So are you prescriptive with your design, or do you really try and focus on the way that someone will exist in the space?
The person is always first. We talk a lot to our clients about this concept of frictionless design. So being able to live at ease, you know, because if we have friction with a table, a person, or plumbing fixtures, they're not going to last in our lives. We're going to want to replace them quicker than we should be. If you're surrounded in your home with things that do not cause you friction, that support your daily life and make you able to live at ease, then those things you're more likely to live with for longer. So what I find, in a lot of times we're going to meet with clients, we're going to see their homes, and we are being asked to rip out things that are like 4 or 5 years old, you know, bathrooms that have been put in that people have been, they've put in natural stone, and they just don't have the mental capacity to deal with protecting that and constantly sealing it and constantly looking after it. And I find there's so much churn just from people being misspecified. And so it comes a little bit back to what Trevor was saying about, you know, your intake questionnaire, like really staring people down and saying, okay, how are you going to live in this? Like what do you do in the bath? Like, do you like your hair to get wet? Do you like to read a book? Like, what do you do? So that we can ensure that what we're putting in there is going to fit the purpose. And so I think if you can tailor your findings to that person, then they will last longer, and therefore that is more sustainable than potentially sort of trying to put like a carbon neutral countertop and saying, oh, you've got to have this, when maybe the color or the pattern doesn't suit the person and they're going to rip it out in 5 years' time anyway. So
going back to what you said, is that you're oftentimes taking out a renovation from 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah. When you do that, is there a company that you use that will come in and reuse those products, or do they just go straight to landfill?
It's really hard. I mean,
it's hard to find.
Sometimes, I mean, Trevor's giggling, he knows the situation. I mean, there are some things that, yes, you can give to Habitat for Humanity. You know, a lot of times I know builders will just list them for free and somebody will come and pick them up. Do we know where they're going? No. But often when things are getting removed, they're done. Yeah.
Wondering if there's a business opportunity there. Just wondering. And when you're looking at interior design finishes, you had talked about carbon neutral countertops. Are there finishes that you lean or gravitate towards that are more environmentally friendly than others? Like, is hardwood flooring better than cork flooring?
We always, I mean, in terms of fabrics and materials, we're always looking for things that are natural. So I'll only use wool carpeting in a client's home.
Did you say wool?
Wool, yeah. So something that is breathable but can also be cleaned easily. Because again, it comes down to maintenance, because life is going to happen. So if I give someone who has kids and 2 pets, and here's your silk and viscose mixed carpet, it's going to last like 3 or 4 months. So it just comes down to being very specific about what you are advising your clients to buy. With fabrics, again, we really stick to a palette of neutral, whether that's, of natural materials, whether that's cotton, linen, silk. Again, things that are breathable and that can be laundered and cleaned. Now, there are instances if we do have a very sunny south-facing window, then if I put linen or silk in that, it is going to disintegrate and fall apart in 5 years. So that's probably where you need shutters, or you are hanging, or you are hanging something with a high polyester content, because that's going to last. So there's always that sort of push-pull, between.
Has upcycling come to the design world yet? Like taking used fabrics and turning them into new window coverings or carpets?
I mean, we upcycle. We have a clause like in our client contract that says, what if we have scraps of fabric left over at the end of your project, would you like them back, or can we upcycle them on our website? So we now make cushions and things from beautiful designer fabrics and then donate all the proceeds to charity. So that's our way of trying to keep bits and pieces out of landfill, because normally you'll have enough to do like a cushion front or a cushion back. So the deal is that each cushion must be made up of 2 or 3 different client projects, and then they just go on our website, and as I say, profits go to charity. So that's one way that we try and sort of get, because you go into our workrooms and it's just like the amount of fabric leftovers. But I mean, talking about sort of fabrics, I mean, there's a huge move now to digital printing, which when it first came out, I think there's a few designers in the audience. We were all like aghast at digital printing because, we all love block printing. But, digital printing takes no water. They're not having to make up excess dyes to ensure that they can get a run. So there are things that are slowly coming through, but it is slow. I mean, in the UK, you cannot upholster a sofa in a fabric that has less than a 75% natural content.
Oh, wow.
So like you're forced to do it, but it
begs the question why we're not right there yet.
Yeah. I know. It's interesting. Yeah.
That is interesting. And when I'm going to ask the same question I asked Trevor. How often do your clients ask you about environmental design? Never.
I've got still away from my studio here. I'm going, rarely, if never. Yes, yeah. Normally we're bringing it up and we're talking about it just as in, but it's rarely something that's really asked for.
So in a time where we're very mindful about sustainability, do you find it interesting that there's this movement to excess in design? We're sort of going back to multi-layered fabrics and very busy and lots of lights and lots of, not necessarily pot lights. I think pot lights are on the out, but I was looking at some recent designs and it was very, very excessive in terms of design. And there seems to be a movement towards that, even though we're all talking about being mindful of the environment.
I don't know if that's just a swing from us being in our house for the past sort of 3 years and us all nesting and just having nothing to do but shop online. I don't know if that's the case, but I certainly find our clients are, they're investing when they come and work with us. They're investing in themselves as much as they're investing in their home, and we never, I'd rather somebody left like an empty corner in their room if we just haven't found that perfect piece. Mm-hmm. Because if somebody's buying something that's just good enough, it's guaranteed to end up in landfill. Mm-hmm. So we're really cognizant about that. And it's like, you can't absolutely love everything. I always say to my clients, like, if you were to wear all your favorite things at once, it would be a hot mess. So some things have to be the sort of quiet understudy in the rooms, and sometimes clients will be like, I don't know about that. But then when it
would definitely be a hot mess.
when it all goes in, they're like, okay, yeah, you needed that quiet understudy over in the corner, So yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, questions? Any questions from the audience? Yes, go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you, because I feel like in the last 30 minutes, I just learned a lot of new things. And I think that's reflective of kind of where, let's just talk about our city is at right now, right? Like, I think awareness is probably the first part of this, because, you know, you mentioned like none of your clients bring this up. I think a lot of people are just not even aware of some of the repercussions of their decisions. And then the other challenge is affordability, right? Like, I look at this room, like, okay, not for this room, and not for this neighborhood, but you go outside of the core and people are just trying to buy a home, let alone now you want to talk to me about putting in this hot water tank. What do you call it? Hot water tank?
A heat pump.
Heat pump. That's
Yeah.
Sorry, I took notes.
Yeah.
So, you know, so I think
We're recording it. You can watch it again later.
I think it's just finding that intersection of awareness and affordability, and then also what can the government do? Like, maybe it's not rebates. I think that's one part of it, but like when you think about anyone here that's done a build or whatever, you have to build the permit, and you're like, oh, pick me, let's go list at City Hall, right? And you're like, look at who's ahead of you. But maybe like, you know, you abide by some of these best practices and you get bumped up on the list. Like things like that could give more incentives to people to actually, it's not just a monetary rebate, but it's also like, hey, you do something that's great for the environment and we're going to give you some sort of a credit or a benefit.
There should be benefit.
Right,
And
like
as it
if it's-
becomes more common,
Yeah.
exactly, then the prices will come down.
Well, exactly.
So
Because right
it's
now
a bit
it's
of
not
a catch-22,
scale.
like which
we're
ones
offering solutions
first?
that are really specific that most people probably don't even know about. So I think this is a great event. Like I honestly am sitting here going, no, I didn't.
Yeah, no, it's not something we think about. Sadly, it's not something we think about very
Yeah,
often,
exactly.
right? Yeah. I mean, I wonder if legislation, like, do you
Yeah,
lobby
I think it's
for?
coming. Like,
Yeah.
I think when we talk about heat pumps, like there were more heat pumps purchased in the U.S. than gas furnaces last year. Like we're at the, you know, and if you turn on the radio, like Reliance is advertising, like the big gas, like HVAC companies advertising that you should install a heat pump. Granted, if you get someone from Reliance in your home, they may not advocate, or they might get you on a hybrid system. It's a step, but it's not like all the way. But we're getting there. Like you brought up, one of you brought up BC as well. You can't buy a new air conditioner now. If your air conditioner breaks, you have to buy a heat pump. And the rebates in BC are a little bit more generous and such that like a new heat pump is actually cheaper anyway than an air conditioner. So it makes sense. Here, we're starting to get to that point, but not quite there. But I think more needs to be done from where I'm sitting. More needs to be done to encourage more HVAC contractors, more builders to get on board with not using spray foam, so that it's not this uphill battle every time that, you know, sometimes we lose, or sometimes I have to tell my clients, like, pick your battles, like pick between a heat pump and spray foam, like that. Yeah. They shouldn't have to pick. But so more incentives on that side to like motivate more contractors to get on board would be amazing.
But there's three parts to your problem. There's like the government legislation, the contractors, and then the clients, right? So like we're doing a large format multi-res right now, and it is there. It's like you talk to the planning, condos and like many residentials in a tower or whatever, and it's like you bring forward like TGS tier 2, and like they get like their ears perk up, and like now all of a sudden it's like, oh well, we'll give you 2 more floors if you like guarantee us TGS tier 2. It's like, so it's getting into like the horse trading a little bit, which is helpful on larger scale. But in the single family dwelling, like a lot of this crowd right here, it's challenging because it's down to like that end user. And I think the only thing I would say is like, in terms of like how does it get to the people outside of the like downtown core who are like just trying to buy a home? I always make the reference to like luxury cars. It's like, you know, the first power window wasn't in a Honda. It was in like a Porsche or a Mercedes, and then eventually it just kind of trickles down. So at some point, someone's gonna like get passionate about it. Like a client of ours is like, can you do a new build with no concrete? And we're like, let's try. You know, it's like, that's expensive. It's expensive because we have to figure it out. It's expensive because it's not done. Then we got to go find the right trade to build it. But then they figure it out, and then all of a sudden it ends up in a publication somewhere. And then someone's like, I'm gonna try that. And then it kind of works its way down, you know, and it takes time. But you could kick that question around and say, it's, you know, the people in this room who are interested about it, who can make the choice between A and B and take that leadership role. You know, there are some rebates and there are people paying attention, but that's the opportunity to like help create change, because the people who are just trying to get into their first home or, you know, have, you know, multi-generations in a house and are just trying to make ends meet, they're obviously not exploring, you know, cross-laminated timber foundations. You know, it's not happening.
I feel like there's a TV series going to come out of this. We had a question from...
Yeah, I had a question just regarding heat pumps. Are they, my favorite topic then. Are they powerful or efficient enough to heat an old home that isn't well insulated? Because all I've seen is that they really struggle in cold climates. Is that not the case anymore?
There are kind of two aspects to your question. So as the temperature drops, like there are heat pumps that are called cold climate heat pumps, and so they will not struggle. They will be able to provide heat. Some are rated up to minus 30 degrees, some minus 27 degrees Celsius. Just depends on the heat pump. The one limitation when it comes to an old Toronto home, if it is fairly large, uninsulated, super leaky, like leaks like a sieve, is that the ductwork may not actually have the capacity to be able to deliver the heat. So you're either looking at like a smaller heat pump than what is needed in the home with some kind of backup. So heat pumps can come with an electric backup that's built in and it operates at the same time. And if you're gonna use it sparingly, like if sort of the sizing of the heat pump is such that you're not gonna use it that often, like maybe 20% of the time, it's not gonna be that expensive. But if you're talking about like a huge, like, I don't know, old massive Victorian home that's fully like detached and everything and nothing's been done, you're likely that's not a good solution for you. You either got to do some work to reduce like your energy consumption, or maybe gas is actually a more viable, like economically viable backup for that house.
Do you consult on that though? You would go
Yes.
and do an energy audit and then say the likelihood of it working.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I think like that's primarily what we do. Like I feel like I want to paint a more positive picture because anyone who comes to us is already like looking to get off of gas. They are so motivated, but that's because that's who we are, and so I've already like worked with like 300 plus homeowners last year, and like 50 of them got all the way off of gas. Like things are happening, and they're not just like super wealthy. There are like new homeowners who have an old furnace and air conditioner and they need to replace it. We do have a zero interest loan that the feds offer. For a very brief moment, the city had a really great zero interest loan as well. Unfortunately, it was here and then it was oversubscribed and then it was done. But I kind of lost my train of thought. But anyway, like I think things are happening. Yeah, I need cards.
But you also asked about like envelope, right? And it's like, my old Victorian house that I'm like dying to update, all this preaching that I'm doing, it probably has 30 air exchanges an hour.
Whoa.
Like, I don't know. It's
That's
like,
insane.
it gets windy and you're like, wow, I think the window's open. You're like, no, that's just the house, And it's like, so you go through all this energy effort to like get a heat pump and it like, either using electricity or you're using gas, like you're using power, right? You're still consuming, right? So like really, if you're trying to make a meaningful difference, one of the places to start is the envelope. If you have a wicked envelope and you're using a gas furnace that turns on like once a day for half an hour, it's like, well, that's actually really high performing, like in terms of consumption. So envelopes are harder, heat pumps are easier, but if you have that big problem, really like if there's a way to figure out your envelope, that's like the greatest starting point, which is also the most resource intense.
It's true, and I don't mean to like say that heat pumps are like the silver bullet because we fast forward this and everyone switches from a gas car to an electric vehicle and a gas furnace to a heat pump, and then all of a sudden, where does that new electricity have to going to come from?
It's just using less. Like if you can insulate and use less, that's like who cares what your system is?
Well, I think it's like depends,
it's all
really,
better.
and I think,
Sorry.
I think it doesn't have to be either or. I think like it's important to look at both and meet the homeowner, like the client, where they're at, and if they have a broken gas furnace, it makes sense to get a heat. But if they're planning a renovation or they have siding that's falling off, like 100% you should work on your envelope. Ideally, you do both, and within the means that you can. And the rebates are great when it comes to heat pump. They're not enough to motivate people. The number of people I've worked with in like the Pocket in the east end of Toronto, and there's like a very motivated group of people there that are trying to get their homes to net zero. These are like framed homes that were typically worker homes, so they're super leaky.
Like Danforth and Jones.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of them started off saying, we're going to do the envelope. We're going to like wrap from the exterior, like insulation, an air barrier, new beautiful like wood siding, everything. They all got quotes, and only like one of the homeowners is actually moving forward with the envelope. Everyone else is doing heat pumps and like a little bit of other work, like maybe some attic insulation. But yeah, the envelope work is amazing, but very costly right now.
Many steps to it, right? It's not just one.
Yeah.
Yes, Kyle?
I have a few questions. Trevor, you said you're mentioning concrete. Is concrete bad?
So when she says 40% of the global emissions from construction is from construction, you know what I'm getting at. A lot of that's concrete. Like think bridges, think like major infrastructure projects, and concrete. The energy it takes to create concrete is extremely high. So it's also very difficult to disassemble. So it's like, you know, you build this thing and it's like you need to change it. Well, someone comes in with jackhammers, it ends up in a dump truck, and then it just gets poured. All that embodied carbon just gets like rolled back into the landscape. So that's it, like we're messing with that right now. To not have concrete, it's super challenging. Concrete solves a lot of problems in terms of like design and building envelope requirements. But really concrete is like a lot of energy is stuck in concrete. A lot.
And then Sarah, I have a question about geothermal. I showed a house today actually that had a geothermal system in it, and I loved that specifically about it. I think it's one of two homes that I've ever shown that has geothermal. So can you talk about that? I know it's expensive, but can you talk about that option, if it is viable or not?
It's not super viable usually in Toronto because it is quite expensive. You're like, geothermal is basically you're drilling and then you put like water underground essentially to oversimplify it. And in Toronto, if you don't have a lot of land, you're talking about drilling down. They're doing this at, I think, the High Park Nature Center, and they're doing it at U of T as well. So it kind of makes sense in very small occasions in Toronto, but even then, it's about twice the cost of an air-to-air heat pump, which is what I've been speaking about. And the efficiencies are slightly better, but not enough to make it like financially worthwhile. I've seen a few homes in like outside of Toronto where like they're heating with propane and they're super leaky old farmhouses that they've done work on their envelope, but they're never going to get it to a point where it can heat well with an air-to-air heat pump. So I've seen geothermal be a good solution there when the loops are sort of horizontal, not as expensive.
It's also great at scale. Like when you have bigger buildings, like small single family is like very reasonable. Like it's a lot of money for that. But if you start to talk about like towers or like a museum, like when there's like a lot of heating happening, there's a lot of footprint to work with, and there's a lot of dollars at play, then I think you get a lot of value out of it at that scale.
Megan?
So I have a question about insulation. I'm hating spray foam, and as a designer, I'm sure Gillian has dealt with this. If like the spray foam goes in and it's like, oh, there's in the wrong spot, or its client's made a change, and it's a massive undertaking to try and move anything. So my question is, for the average homeowner who's doing a renovation, what is a really efficient, effective alternative that does not require a builder who's got like some specialty in it? Like, what would be your recommended for Trevor or for Sarah? Like, what are your recommended like alternatives?
Can I ask a question? Are you changing the outside of the house too, or just everything inside the inside?
But let's say not changing the outside.
It's a very complicated question that you've asked. And like our firm, we talk about this stuff all the time. I mean, the best way to get insulation in a way that doesn't, that allows you a lot of flexibility is like rock wool, like a mineral bat, like the pink stuff, but like a new version of that. The problem is you don't get the same amount of like insulation value per inch that you do in like a foam or a spray. So like why spray foam is so popular is because for like, what is it, R7 an inch? Or something like that. Like in 3 inches, you can get an entire like appropriate envelope, whereas at R4, which is like half that. So I think, you know,
It depends on how many inches.
yeah, like if you can get the 2 inches on the outside, if you're redoing your cladding and you put rock wool on the inside, that's like best case scenario. But if you can only, pardon me? Straw. Good. It works, I think, in particular climates really well, and when it's readily available, and you can do that kind of straw mud mixture, it's really strong. But flammability is a challenge, and And then like the consistency of installation is really challenging. So you can get, like rock wool is a mineral wool product, so it has a lot of the value that straw has in that capacity in terms of like being able to dry and deal with mold and stuff. But it comes in like ready to insert, 16-inch on-center stud, So you can do it. I think there's applications where it's really meaningful, but then there's better solutions, I think, depending on what your position is on that.
So if you don't have the inches to spare, you're not a good
Like,
alternative.
what would I do? I don't know, like if you have a 2x6 wall, or instead of a 2x4 wall, or you can get like an extra couple of inches of rock wool, then that goes a long way. And then you deal with your air barrier on the inside, which isn't ideal, but it works.
From a design perspective, I am finding that clients know they're not coming to me asking, okay, I want to be 100%, completely environmental. I want to be, off the grid and all. Or they're not asking those questions, but they are becoming more appreciative the more we know and the more that we can give back to them. Even little things like you really should go with a induction versus gas stove, like tiny little, and this is why. But I'm finding them to be more open to the conversation, and I'm curious. So then that's just a comment really, but then because you asked my one question, I'm going to go on to the next one, which is windows. So are there, talking about the envelope, you can't change. It's a semi-detached house that's a brick, double brick from the 1920s. What can we do with windows if we're replacing, we're maybe even
Heat pumps and shutters. Just write those 2 notes and go have a glass of wine.
Sorry. But
Yeah.
are there new things you can do with windows? Besides putting beautiful.
Windows are great, but if you have no insulation in the envelope and you put in like an amazing window, it's like going outside naked in -30 with a scarf on. Like it's like you have bigger problems,
Bigger and bigger windows. Houses are becoming.
Yeah.
They're finding more fish tanks.
Shutters. No, I'm kidding. No, I think big windows, you need to understand what the windows are doing. If they're big south-facing windows, you just need to know that you're going to get a lot of like solar gain in them. You're going to get a lot of like heat exchange. And if, when Sarah does math and in like the engineering side of it, stuff, when we work with mechanical engineers, like the size of the window and what direction it faces has a huge bearing on how big the system needs to support the house. So in short, glass houses need a lot of energy support to maintain the well-being of them. If the glass house only has the glass bar facing north, then the engineers have a lot less of a challenge, So I think with big windows, double pane obviously, triple pane helps, but the curve falls off pretty fast with performance from double to triple, and the cost is linear. So you kind of want to weigh that out, but really it's like, if it's a lot of windows, then you pay attention, but if you're looking at a retrofit where it's like a Victorian and the house is like R5, which it should be R25, and you go and put triple pane in, it's like, it's all going everywhere. It's going around your windows.
So then moving over, Gillian, is there things you do specifically that clients appreciate or that you just know are the right things to do in a like you said, south-facing window in the middle of winter? You're not going to put a linen.
No.
Maybe you would because you're not getting any sun, but you're not. Linen's not going to give you that insulation that you might need
No.
on an old house.
Yeah, so definitely if it's a south-facing window, we always have sunshades on. So there's always some form of sort of roller blind that's close to the window that's going to almost be permanently down. And then like if it's an old drafty house where maybe we have new windows, but we have walls that are, there's a wind blowing through them. There's nothing like a good pair of like floor length interlined draperies just to help absorb that, fabric can go a long way, but it can't, yeah.
I would also add, Gillian, you were talking initially about picking things that will last or that you're going to continue to love. And I find with windows, particularly, there's a lot of people that I will go into their house and they're like, I hate these windows, and they're not that old. And they're more often vinyl framed, so fiberglass and clad wood are more expensive, but do last. Anyone who I was just in a house today, they have these beautiful wood windows that they bought 15 years ago, and they're quite leaky. Probably the gas that's in between the panes might have already leaked out, but they're we don't want to get rid of them. And it's an old house, so yeah, the ratio of sort of the walls and double brick walls to the windows, it's not always worth it anyway. And so they're probably going to keep them rather than replacing these crappy vinyl windows that I find tend to leak faster anyway because they expand and contract, so they don't hold their seal as well. So guiding people towards picking something that might be a little bit more expensive, but they're gonna love and want to keep, I think is environmentally the way to go when it comes to windows.
Yeah, windows really are like the eyes or the soul of the house.
Yeah.
And you can tell, I mean, I know there's a lot of realtors in the audience. I mean, they can make or break a house. Like it totally is. And when we first bought our house, the windows, I mean, some of them were original to the house, and I think the house is from like 1915, so you can imagine how bad those windows were. And we spent way more money than I ever thought possible on windows, but 20 years on, like, I love them, and they're still perfection.
What's the free material?
We got Lowens, so it's, I think they used, is it Baltic fir, and then it's clad with, yeah. But they're beautiful, and it was like sticker shock, but it was worth it. But it's
Actually, this lady was first. Sorry.
So I work with the design industry and closely and connect them with luxury brands and all of that. And I'm just wondering, for Gillian, if you're noticing that some of the brands that you work with are trying to be more environmentally conscious, if they're doing programs and maybe inspiring you so that you have more tools to bring to your homeowners.
Some are. I mean, I think we now make a point of asking, okay, what do you do? And some will say, we all drive hybrid cars. And I'm like, okay, that's not what I was asking for. There's a great fabric house out of the UK called Romo. They're just about to launch a new collection of textiles that are, I haven't had my hands on them yet, but they're all made out of recycled plastic, but apparently they have a beautiful soft handle. So what I'm finding is things are really coming, certainly from my side of the fence, coming from Europe, and then they're slowly coming here. I mean, I do know though with showers, I mean, most shower sets come with, you know, a flow restrictor. It is the first thing our clients will ask us to remove. Like if we install a shower with that on, it is it's the first thing it's a call. Can we get this out because we've not got enough water?
So what are you going to do? But one interesting thing I do know with Kohler, so they've been recycling, so they'll grind down the toilets that are removed and everything, and now they have the waste lab there, and I'm not pitching them, but I'm just saying that, so they're taking all of that waste and grinding it down, and they've made tile out of it. And so they're trying to repurpose, because some of these companies, a line gets discontinued, things get changed, and then what do you do with all of that waste? So they're trying to be more environmentally conscious. So I'm hoping that the design community is seeing that more and getting inspired by that. And Trevor, I wanted to ask you if you're seeing more passive house builds and interest in that here in Ontario.
I mean, passive house, in short, no, like a little bit. Passive house is very, very challenging. Like hitting net zero on a house and hitting a passive house accreditation is like, I would say I don't think I could do it without like doing a lot of work on my own time to like figure it out. It's very, very challenging to do. But I think, people are asking the questions, and that's really exciting for us. Even like the amount of people who showed up here tonight is exciting for us, because it just means that there's like, we have ears that are listening, and we are learning, all of us, and it's a very fast-changing industry. Greenwashing is everywhere. So like Kohler, runs their plant on coal, but grinds up their plastic after for like a carpet that a bunch of consumers buy and throw out a year later. You're like, thanks for the, totally, right? And I think it all just sort of comes down to like people caring, like just literally using less things, period. And then it's up to us to try and like, if people aren't interested, we're gonna like sneak stuff in anyway. Like we're gonna try not to do a thing that's really bad just for the sake of doing it. Like we have our practices, and those will hopefully start to move the needle. But like the fact that you know about passive house, which is basically just like a very complex accreditation process for the outcome of a new built home. But Passive House is like 1,000 inputs for like things you have to check off. Like 10 of them cover 90% of the effort. And if you can hit 5 out of 10 of those, you're like 50% improving on the outcome of the home. So
we're working on our first Passive House, and it is fascinating.
Super, yeah.
Like it is.
Where is it? Is it in the city?
It's in Leaside.
Wow, that's interesting. I would have thought it was a countryside.
Yeah, it's on Fleming Crest. Yeah. But it's just the lot was. I mean, it's the original house is still standing. Demo starts next month. But it was the orientation on the lot. This couple had been waiting quite a wee while to find a lot with a specific shape so that it could.
How much more will it cost them to build it?
Oh, it's a lot.
Like double? 3 times?
Obviously double.
At least double.
Yeah.
That makes it hard for me.
It makes it really hard.
Megan,
again, you can have big wins
Yeah.
without having to go to that level.
Yeah.
Going to that level is amazing.
No, I heard the 50% very
Yeah.
clearly. Yeah. I'm not saying that to be dismissive.
I got it, okay? Yeah.
No, I'm saying it's an important
Yeah.
takeaway.
Yeah.
Megan, what were you?
Gillian, I was curious if the people who are ripping out things that are 5 years old.
Yes.
Is that work that they have done, or is it from a previous owner? I'm curious what happened there, and that obviously is very wasteful.
Yeah,
5 years into something, whether it's a tile or a window or whatever.
A lot of times it's the clients have done the reno with another design professional, and they just haven't either been asked the right questions or known what questions to ask.
Right.
So they will be specified marble, which is beautiful, but then it just turns out it's just not. They can't live with it. The finishing and the maintenance, it's just wearing them down. I think unless you work in the design industry, you think that if there's a toilet or a faucet or something that's for sale, then it must be fit for the purpose it's for sale for. There are, I would say, half the toilets on the market are not designed for men who stand to go to the bathroom. Like the bowl is not, and so it's, Megan, it's so true.
It's definitely the bowl's problem.
It's definitely the bowl's problem, but it's true. But then if you don't know that, and you can't say to your client, God, you've got 2 teenage boys in your house, like, okay, we need this, and they'll be like, oh my God, yeah, because you're like, but it's things like that, and if you don't know to ask those questions, or just you don't even ask them, you just know what toilet to specify. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they're losing the will to live, and that toilet's getting ripped out 6 months after it's been installed.
Right.
So again, it comes back to friction. It comes back to, I would rather spend this money than have to look at this or live with this for another day. So yeah.
Well, oh yes.
One more question.
Yes, closing question.
I love this notion of fireplaces, but I imagine that they're very, no, in terms of their ability to heat, but also the heat loss, and so many of them are natural gas. Do you have any recommendations about that to create the ambiance, but without the footprint?
How do you feel about candles?
I'm
joking.
Kind of, the grand.
I know what you mean, though. I was thinking it earlier because I have fireplaces at home, and I was sort of sitting here
we just went through this, like, we're going through this right now, like, very actively. The best outcome is electric, but we all know what electric fires look like. So, the idea of like humans gathering around a fire is a relatively like embedded concept. And I think it's, as Gillian said, winters are tough, and, you come home on a rainy day and flip on a fire, whether it's gas or wood burning, like there's a very like nice outcome of that. From a health perspective, blowing around a bunch of gas and burning it in your home, not ideal. Wood burning, kind of the same. We recently found a product that I'm going to go see on Friday, and it's a vapor fireplace, and it basically blows vapor up in this very compelling fashion, and it gets illuminated. And for everything we can see so far, it's like could potentially like it's not even hot. It's just like it's cool vapor. Think of a humidifier. It's like a very constructed humidifier, and you can actually have you can upgrade it to a heating unit under it that will like use electricity to push out a little bit of heat so you get that feel. We've noticed that the 3-sided glass ones are really good because the air currents don't mess with the vapor, which makes it feel less honest.
Can we ask you to post about this on your social
Sure.
when you go visit on Friday?
Sure. Yeah.
I want to see what it looks like.
Yeah.
You can say, if you know, you know.
Yeah, one of those. Yes, I think the tech's getting there, but like the move away from gas cooktops, because it just leaks gas, and inhaling natural gas isn't awesome, and the environmental impacts as well. So we have 2 projects. One's a luxury multi-res, and we're trying to not do gas for a number of reasons. And the other's a private single family, and the client's like, I just don't want gas burning in my home. He has MS, and he's like very sensitive to his environment. So we're like, this is like a Friday thing. We'll keep you posted.
We will be watching. Yeah. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to our panelists so much. I think the big takeaway is we just have to care a little bit more, and then hopefully that will affect change. There are drinks and snacks downstairs. Enjoy. Thank you.